so much for coming today. I appreciate it. As most of you know, usually our parenting adult coffees are topic specific. So we usually do mental health, drugs and alcohol, stress, social media, sexuality and gender identity, body image, etc. And those are great because people can come and share their specific challenges as they relate to these issues and get strategies and support from each other. But also our goal for Speakup programming is that you leave feeling less alone, more willing to ask for help, know who the people are and places that you can go for help, but also so that as adults, we know that there are things that we can do or not do that will make it more or less likely that our children will talk to us about what they're struggling with. And so, but what are those things that you can do or not do? And so we're going to be covering those and are covering those in our two-part moving from control to communication. And as a little context, when we were younger, we would often have the talk, right? So we would have the sex talk, the drug talk, it was one and done. And what we now know is it's not about the talk, it's about the conversation and conversations and the relationships that make that possible. So as a refresher, last time we talked about the Speakup skill set, which has 6 steps to it. And we talked about the first 3. Last time we talked about orienting to the Speakup mindset, starting the conversation, and listening with empathy. And that was the fun part where we did our poll on empathy blockers and the things that we do that get in the way of showing our kids empathy. And today we're going to cover support them in problem solving, encourage help seeking and self-care, and checking in and continuing the conversation. So kind of to pick up where we left off last time, imagine that you are in the Speakup mindset, you're focused on talking to your young person as an equal in the conversation, and you see them as in the leading role of their life and you're in the supporting role. You have set the stage. It's a good time to talk. You're not distracted, you've got some privacy, and you are also calm, even if you're not. You have started the conversation by saying what you see. I noticed that, it seems like, and you're listening first and with empathy. So we talked about we're not interrupting, we are not educating them, we are not trying to fix it and offer them immediate solutions. You are encouraging them to keep talking by saying things like, I hear you, or my favorite, help me understand. You're validating their feelings, being careful not to catastrophize, which, as I spoke about last week, I can do when I'm fearful, especially if it's like late at night and I haven't been able to connect directly to my kid through his phone. You are listening with an open mind and being non-judgmental. And at Speakup, we talk a lot about being non-judgmental, but what does that really look like? What does that sound like? And so first, you're just watching your facial expressions, like don't show the shock, the horror, be careful of what they hear when you're not in conversation with them, basically what they overhear or what you talk about when you're talking about other people. I know that there was a good article recently about how we judge other people's kids, or they hear us say things. Make room for mistakes. I can remember sitting in a breakout at a high school and a young girl started to cry. And she said, I had sex with my boyfriend and he broke my heart. I was devastated, broken when he broke up with me. And she said, but I couldn't talk to anybody about it because I'm not supposed to be having sex. And that just sort of stuck in our mind about how when we lay down what we hope for our kids, or we can make it so that there's not room for them to make mistakes and then they won't talk to us. The opposite of judgmental is curious. So be curious about what they think the problem is, how they describe the problem, and what their plan is for the solution. So that catches us up from last week to where we are today, which is support them in problem solving. Next slide. So we want to normalize struggles. We want to send messages like, when you struggle, not if, you can come to me. Everybody struggles with something at some point. Young people sitting in a breakout session and hearing others have the same experience or feelings as they do just gives them such relief that they're normal. You know, Ken Ginsberg always talks about the two fundamental questions of adolescence are, who am I and am I normal? So the more that we can normalize these issues, which we know from statistics are normal, the better they feel in talking to us about it. Understand the problem from their perspective. So many of you have heard this story before, but it was pretty life-changing for me. I was giving my oldest son unsolicited advice, as I often do. He was cut from the soccer team as a sophomore. And I immediately went into about how he should go out for crew and why he should go out for crew. And he just calmly looked at me and he said, Mom, you may have the wisdom that comes from experience, but you do not have the current context. You don't know anything about the crew team at our school, you know, like, and that really helped me because I think we can all agree the better we understand the problem, the more quickly and effectively we're going to come to a solution. But it's so common for me, and I think for many adults, to offer the wisdom of our experience pretty soon after the first two statements about what's going on. And what we know is when we can marry the wisdom that comes from experience with the current context, which is their knowledge about the problem, we can come to great solutions. But we have to start with their part of sharing what the problem is. And then using phrases just like, help me understand. We want to support them in problem solving by coaching them through a problem solving thought process, right? So they start to talk about what the problem is. We want to say, like, have you ever had this problem or situation before? And then they're going to say yes. And we can say, well, what worked? What worked then? If they say no, we can go back to like, what are their strengths that they might be able to use in this situation? So last week, we talked about having the conversation with our kids now about what are their three greatest strengths. And then honestly, put them in your phone. And when you're about to head into a hard conversation with them, just kind of orient yourself to these are the strengths that they have, the way they describe them. And we can help remind them of those when they're problem solving and get them to think about who can be helpful. So we talked last week about who are your people. We talked about how take the time now and say to your kids, if you can't talk to me about something or you can't reach me or you don't want to, who are the adults that you would go to? And we talked about, you know, the answers that my kids have to that. And also ask, what is your plan? And that was so helpful. Do you have some ideas about how you want to handle this? Then we move on to encouraging them in help seeking and self-care. First and foremost, remember that we don't have to be the solution or have the solution. Last week, we talked about how one of the hardest things for parents is not to jump in and fix it. Then you just want to message like problems are solvable, help is available, and together we're going to find that help. And that could be formal help like a therapist or a counselor or a doctor, but it's also really the informal supports that we focus on. Because even if you're getting formal help, you might be getting it once a week or once every other week or once a month, but all those other hours of the day, what are the informal supports? Who do they talk to? Who are their people? And then also, how can you be helpful? And then self-help. When we talk about encouraging self-care, it's the intentional things that they do to feel better emotionally and physically and mentally. And we had this great conversation at a Radnor High School. I was in a mental health breakout the other day at the high school. And so quickly into the conversation, the students started talking about what they do to decompress, what they do for self-care. And they talked about things like they have anxiety and there's a necklace that they wear. It just looks like a cool piece of jewelry, but you breathe through this cylinder and it's like gives you this opportunity to slow your breathing down. It doesn't make any noise. It doesn't look strange. They talked about how they sing because, you know, people know that slowing down your breathing is good, but singing really helps you to breathe. And one person his son talked about how he like does these duets of cover songs with his mom and like just interesting and funny things and ways that they have. One person's writing a book, not just a journal. And just, it was really cool as they shared their ideas. Ask them like what helps you decompress and what are your coping strategies. And there's a great Ken Ginsberg and the Center for Parenting Communication that we partner with. They have a great digital stress management plan. And then when you're talking about help seeking and self-care, we like to ask, how can I be helpful? Best 5 words a parent say to everybody, how can I be helpful? And one of the things that's so interesting, I remember sitting in a middle school breakout, and this young 7th grade boy braces on, just like smiling at all the parents. At the end of the breakout, he said to the parents, think comforting, not counseling. Give us a bowl of ice cream, make sure our uniform's washed, you know, just do something fun with us. And sometimes that's the support that we can offer. It doesn't have to be having the solution, giving them great advice. It can just be making their life a little easier. Thanks. We can go to the next one. And before we check in, I just wanted to give you 2 tips related to encouraging help seeking and self-care. So the first one is, one of the things I love about Speakup is that we don't say anything to parents, we don't say to kids directly. And all the solutions that we offer and all the strategies and the mindset, it works for all of us, whether you're a youth, an educator, or a parent. So the first tip is, who are your people and what do you do for your coping strategy? And in fact, often when families or young people are really struggling with stuff, we advise parents, like, talk to your own counselor on how you can be supportive and helpful while your child might be talking to their counselor. But the other thing is, what do you message directly or indirectly as a family about help seeking? What is your family motto or mantra? And I see my mom's on here, and we grew up with the message, you can do anything that you put your mind to. And that's awesome in so many contexts, but it doesn't really encourage help seeking. It's sort of like self-determination, you got this, and often we don't. And so, do you ask for directions when you need them? Do your kids hear you say, like, I talked to my siblings about this and their advice was that, or who can help us with this? Any single concept, the idea of like, who can help us with this? Who do we know that's been through that? I know that my twin brother, Matt, we have a big family weekend, part of a huge family, and he advises the young people, the teenagers and 20s, hey, pick a couple adults you admire and interview them. It's fascinating. And it's so helpful because they get to help identify some of their people, but they learn a lot about mistakes those people made. And so it's basically that idea of help seeking, and we can learn from other people. They can make our road smoother or our path faster. And so it's just want to encourage you to think about that. And then we can go to checking in and continuing the conversation. Let your kids know when you have a tough conversation that you plan to check back in and then do it. But also tell them, like, all right, if I'm checking in too much, I invite you to let me know. Or if I'm checking in too little, because the chances of me getting it right are kind of slim without some feedback. Don't only interact with them around the problem. Kids will tell us that often they don't talk to their parents about hard things because then it becomes all their parents want to talk about. So here we say, remember both ends. Your child is both a young person struggling with fill in the blank, and they are this amazing young person who is an athlete or a student who is got all these different strengths. So just remember the both end at all times. Let them know they matter. Like, sometimes checking in isn't talking about the specific problem necessarily. It could be they talked about how stressed they are about schoolwork, and maybe you just put a note on their door, good luck on your test today, or being available to listen and continue the conversation. Thank you, Erica. And then we always say, if you can remember nothing else, if all else fails and you're stressed, when kids feel heard and seen, they thrive. So heard is obvious, just listen to them. Seen is notice things about them, just let them know you're paying attention. And at the end of the day, it's not a straight line. We get a lot of different opportunities to course correct, I call it. And if we can listen to them without judgment, they will actually tell us how to best guide and support them. Thanks. Just as a quick recap, when we marry the wisdom that comes from experience with their sense of the current context, today's reality, we can handle any problem. Remember the 5 great words. How can I be helpful? What is your stress management plan and coping strategies as the adult in their life? Think about your family mantra and the messages that you send, and planning to check back in doesn't have to be talking about that all the time, but just letting them know that you heard them and checking in at ways that make sense for them. Thanks.